And all right, we're set up, we're ready, we are go. Um, I know it must be weird having that like minute at the beginning there where I'm just silently sitting there fiddling with things. I'd like to think that it was somehow had become iconic, but it's actually just weird. But the reason, of course, obviously what I'm doing is I'm just doing my own, sharing the URLs on my other websites or on my other, whatever you want to call them, social media sites. But at the same time that I'm doing that, I'm also, I normally I could just be talking because God knows I do talk and I can talk even when I'm doing something else. Not necessarily either of them well, but I can do both at the same time. But I've discovered that because there's a lag um, sometimes in the between where I am and the actual feed. It gets very distracting because I wind up overlapping, and then of course the overlap then goes back through the microphone, and it turns into this feedback hell. So that's why I'm just sitting there going at the beginning. Not who cares anyway. Hello, good evening, good morning. Morning probably for for many of you because it's morning in Europe and it's morning here in California. It's morning on the East Coast in the United States. It's just kind of morning all over many parts of the world, but not all of them, as we also have an Antipodean contingent who often check in from New Zealand and Australia and other parts like that. Occasionally from India, I think. Anyway, and then obviously a lot of folks from Turkey and other parts of Europe, and. So, and of course, still some late hangers on from the United States, especially here on the West Coast. Again, a whole wad of useless verbiage saying absolutely nothing except what I originally started to say, which was good morning, wherever it is, whatever it is, whenever it is, wherever you are. I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading in just a few minutes. First, I'm going to bring you up to date on all the exciting things that are happening. Yeah, not much. I moved the Christmas tree out of the living room. It's still out on the deck with ornaments on it because I haven't gotten anybody else to follow up on the obvious point I was making, which is it's time to take the flippin' Christmas tree down. It's February. I told you we actually got one up before Deb's birthday this year. We got the tree before Deb's birthday this year, that's December 19th. That was a major moment in my in my late adulthood of actually having a tree up by Deb's birthday, not decorated, but just in the house, wafting its fumes. Of course, it has been dry as a bone for weeks now, and a horrendous fire hazard, as anybody knows who knows about Christmas trees. So finally, after kind of floating a few hints and then directly saying a few times, we really need to get this thing out. I finally just dragged the thing out, ornaments and all. I did unplug it first, obviously, the lights and stuff. Just dragged it out onto the deck and, figured now they'll take the hint. Famous last words. It's still sitting out there on the deck 6 days later. We'll see if anybody helps me out with it at any point. I love the young people in our household. They are wonderful human beings. They're going to make a big difference and do a lot of good and cool and wonderful things out in the world. But they're all young people. And those of you, I know no offense meant to those of you who actually are still young people. I was a young people once myself. But one thing I remember from being a young person is like your field of focus is like this, it's like that. It's right what's in front of you. It's mostly about you, which doesn't mean that they're shallow or self-centered. It just means that they don't tend to think of things like, oh yeah, sometime in the next 2 days I should do such and such, unless it's like, or I'll get fired, in which case sometimes they will manage to get it together. Anyway, I do love them, but it's like, it's like not like I don't have enough to do anyway, without having to remind everybody else of what they have to do. I don't really like that. I'm prone to codependency anyway, and I would really rather not have to remind other people of the things that have to be done just to keep a household from falling apart. But that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. So what else did I want to talk about, if anything? And also, how do I get to the comments on this thing? I'm going to have to remember. Yes, there. Okay. From graphics to chat. Okay, good. Before I do that, or before I start reading, is there anything else I really need to talk about? No, we've had a pretty boring week in the sense of nothing bad happened. Um, just lots of work stuff. I'm working on maps with Isaac Stewart and Ron Hyde, trying to get the maps ready for Into the Narrow Dark. And Isaac has now been doing the maps for this series. Previously, I had always done them myself, but I'm very glad not only just to have somebody do them, but somebody as skilled as Isaac doing them. It's like one of those things I don't have to think about now at the end of doing the book. Although I still have a lot of other things I have to think about, I rather not, like doing the synopses and stuff like that. But anyway, so I've been working on those, which is not quite as cut and dried as you'd think, because a lot of these things, here's a helpful hint. A lot of these things are not as clear in my mind as you'd think they would be. You know, like I have these vague pictures in my mind of how things fit together geographically, but every now and then when I'm actually sitting down either to make a map or now just to work with a map maker, all of a sudden I look at things and go like, that's way too far from that. You know, it's like I should have figured that out already. And so if we move that, then it's too far from something else, you know, that kind of stuff. So working on those, working on the final volume, of course, Navigator's Children, dealing with a certain amount of blowback from people who are not happy about the fact that we had to change cover artists, which was not by choice. That was the publishing decision from not my direct publishers, but the folks above them. And which, of course, you know, I would definitely have loved to have had another cover. I mean, if we're going to change, I'm almost glad that we're doing something completely different. But of course, I would love to have more covers from Michael too. This is not the first time this has happened either, by the way. Some of you may remember with Shadow March that after the first book, for whatever reasons, again, publishing related decisions, they decided they weren't going to pay Michael's premium prices because Michael's the best in the field at what he does. You know, he is the Wolverine of fantasy and science fiction art. So we wound up with a very good artist. Todd Lockwood did the rest of the Shadow March series, which was 3 more books. I didn't know it was going to be 3 more books when I did it. I didn't know it was going to be another one of my infamous 4-book trilogies, but there you go. And in this case too, we have quite a quite a different look. It's the same artist, I believe, and the same look as the Brothers of the Wind. Totally different from what Michael's doing. Much less representational, much more iconographic. If you haven't seen it yet, it is. God, I don't know if we've put it up yet on my page. Deb definitely tweeted it, so it's on Twitter, and a lot of people are very grumpy about the fact that it's not Michael, and I'm sad about it too. I would have loved to have seen what Michael would have done with the last 2 books. But sometimes things are just beyond our control. And it's one of the great lessons of life that you learn more and more as you proceed further and further down the rose-strewn path of adulthood and then into maturity. And then, like me, you tiptoe into the meadows of early senescence. That means senility. And there's adolescence, there's senescence. See, that's excuse me. Also, I keep getting things stuck in my throat, which is probably another sign of oncoming senility or something. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. Deb is working on her fabric art and doing some really nice stuff, which I get to see because it's always spread across the dining room table, which has become her workspace now. And yeah, that's what we're doing here. Same animals. Lily, the cat, was just sitting here a moment ago telling me in no uncertain terms that is her time to play hide and go seek with treats. But it'll have to wait until we finish. So sadly, Lily must learn the value of patience. Cats not big on patience. Anyway, so anything else to say? Can't really think of anything. It's been a kind of a normal week of just working and, you know, replacing a printer, trying to do some cleaning in here as I did. You can't see it, but there was a horrendous mass of stuff in one part of the office all around the printer that hadn't been dealt with for probably years at this point. And once I was going to get a new printer, and I just figured, well, I might as well clear that whole thing out. So that was like an entire day's worth of work. I spent another entire day dealing with the carrier for our TV. And after spending literally, not exaggerating here, 4.5 hours on one phone call trying to go through the rungs, up the rungs, and through the minefield of customer service. Mind you, all the people that helped me were really nice. Oh God, which reminded me, I didn't cancel that thing. Anyway, they were going to send out a technician because it'd been off for several days. Nobody could figure it out. They tried everything they could try. And then 2 days later, which was like yesterday, it just went back on again. So I have no idea what that was about. I am not one of those superstitious folks who believes that all technology is magic. I have a fairly decent grounding in technology. But there are times, the complexity, the interweaving of different entities in modern life just to get information back and forth is really kind of overwhelming sometimes. Just sometimes just trying to figure out where the problem is can be horrendous. Something goes out and you're no longer receiving whatever it is you expected to receive, or you're no longer able to send out whatever you expected to send out. But the thing is there's like 700 interlocking pieces along the way that you have to try and figure out where the failure in the system is. So even with the help of the nominal professionals who do this stuff for a living with this particular system, I don't want to get into complaining because I think they did the best they could, and so I'm not going to use the names. But with this particular service provider, they couldn't figure it out either. It was hours and hours, and every single time I'd have to start all over again and explain to them, yes, I unplugged it and plugged it back in again. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did that. Yes, I am the owner of the account. How can I prove it? Fine. Send me another bloody, code number on my phone, which is upstairs, of course. So I'll have to run up and get it. And I come back down. And then once they send me that, they say, can you get us the such and such off your TV box? I'm like, it's upstairs. I'll run up and, that kind of thing. Just hours and hours and hours. So that was my week, but I'm not complaining. Like I said, it beats the hell out of saying, oh, I was in intensive care with my kids or my grandmother, or, something like that. So no complaints, just it's life. Anyway, so hello, let me check in and then I'm going to read some. So who has checked in with us here? Ray has. Hello, Ray. Good to see you. And Andre, good to see you too. I am very pleased to be reading for you. Chris. Hello, Herr Fab. Good to see you. Kristen, hello, hello. Winter, evening to you too. Evening in New Zealand, you see. That's, like I said, it's not morning for everybody who are tuning in here. So, Wouter, hello, good evening from the rainy Netherlands. And I send back to you from the not rainy today, California. And Iris as well. And please give Iris my very best. Ronnie, good morning to you, sir. Mark, morning to you. This is Mark Redmond. I think have we had another Mark yet today? No. Anyway, well, then I didn't need to explain that. Oh, yes. No, we didn't. Anyway, doesn't matter. Christine, hello. Good morning, and I hope you're doing well, too. Holger, hello. Good morning. Good morning. By the twisted picture, I know. I just figured that. I mean, not figured it out. Somebody mentioned it last week, but I just finally went, oh, yeah, it's a mirror image now instead of a true photographic image. Okay, I don't know why that is. I could probably flip it if I really wanted to, but I'll figure that out next time. Anyway, so yes, it is confusing. It's actually closer now to, it's a mirror image now. So this is my left hand, and this is my right hand. And this stuff here, if I turned around, would be on my right. Okay, if that makes any sense. Doesn't matter. It's still my office. It's still a mess. Mahmoud, hello. Good evening. Good morning. Good everything to you. And Petra, hello. Lovely to see you too. Glad to have you back. Mark confirms there is plenty of rain in Yorkshire this morning, which is not unlike confirming that snow is cold, that the sky is above us. Yorkshire does get plenty of rain. It's still a beautiful place. Stephen, hello. Good to see you. Jeremy, hola. Hello. How are you, sir? A pleasure as always. Ronnie, did I say hello to you already, Ronnie? If I didn't, so what's this about an imminent Otherland novella? Oh, well, I'm not quite sure what the timing on the whole thing is. I do have an Otherland novella. It's a long, long short story called what is the actual express name of it? I'll tell you in just a second because it's been a long time since I wrote it. It was originally written as a tie-in with or as a I don't know. It had to do with the Otherland game, with the first Otherland game, and it's called the something. Oh God, I can't even remember the name of my own stories. Okay, in my defense, I have written quite a lot of stuff, and this one hasn't been published, so it's harder to remember the name. The Deathless Prince and the Peach Maiden. That is the name of the story. The Deathless Prince and the Peach Maiden. And it is, as you might guess, from Peach Maiden, it is a Asian-based story, specifically Chinese this time. But it's an Otherland story, and it features Orlando. So it is a true Otherland story in every sense of the word, and it is post the books, the series that we're reading right now. It takes place after that, and at some point, probably when it comes out, I will explain where it fits in the sequence of the Otherland short stories that have come out so far, which were Happiest Dead Boy in the World and Dead Boy Detective of Oz, or at least two that I've written so far. Yes, and there says Winter is representing NZ. Who else? Jessica, hello. Good morning to you. And Cliff, hello. Good to see you. Cliff is in my neck of the woods, so Cliff is on the same time I'm on, and so is Kristen. Hello, Kristen. I said hello to you earlier, but since you've turned into a vampire now, I thought I should greet you in your new vampire form. Sandra, or Sandra, good morning to you. Ilva, hello, sweetie. Signing in from stormy northern Germany, where you were on a short family vacation. Northern Germany is where my family, well, some of my family heritage is multifaceted. It's all little, small, pale people from in the cold and the dark somewhere. So, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, northern Germany, Norway. That's where my folks. That's why I'm this color, folks, because my ancestors did not grow up anywhere near the sun. So they could not afford to have any melanin whatsoever. It's also the blue eyes, if you'll notice. So, yeah, that's all. But anyway, so northern Germany, so Bremen. I have family connections in Bremen, among other things, in Germany. We actually, a goodly part of my family were Osmers, O-S-M-E-R, Osmers on my mother's side. I don't know what my father's side is because I don't know my father. My biological father. I know my stepfather. He's been my father all my life, pretty much. Anna, hello. Good to see you. In the mystical Limburg. Oh, nice. Sounds good. Who else? Anybody else I haven't said hello to yet? No, I think we've got all of the usual suspects. They're all just having a conversation with themselves. They're just, Stephen Watson and Edmund. Hello, Edmund. Good to see you. And Stephen, good to have you too. So when I know more about who's publishing The Deathless Prince and the Peach Maiden, I will tell you about it. It's still a ways from coming out. Although I wrote it, as I said, several years ago. And it's been sitting around waiting for various things for a while. So, okay, I think that's a very long summation of a very little amount of real news or anything interesting or entertaining whatsoever. But by God, it's become part of what I do here is bore people with the minutia, and it is minutia, the minutia of the Tad Williams lifestyle. And it's so funny because there's basically two responses from people that I meet out there in the world. They're the people who actually know my work, always think I'm more important or well known than I actually am, which is nice, I guess. So they're all like, wow, oh, yeah, wow, great to meet you, and they're all like hesitant and sometimes, worried about, can I ask you a question? Is that okay? And I'm always like, yeah, of course it is. I mean, if we're doing a book signing, I may not spend a really long time talking to somebody, but if somebody's got a question at a book signing, while we're in line and I'm signing their book, yeah, absolutely, please feel free or whatever. And I often stop and tell little anecdotes myself. Or, of course, people do not know me, and that's 99.9% of the human beings on this spinning planet of ours. So I'm always very entertained that anybody thinks that, that I'm living some kind of rock and roll lifestyle. I would have loved that when I was younger. The idea of, being a star of some kind was a very big part of my fantasy life, I guess, at some level, although I hadn't really thought it through. But, just wanting people to go, oh, wow, it's him. And now, on the very, very few occasions where I get that kind of treatment, when I'm doing a book tour or something, and people are like, Mr. Williams. I'm just like, yeah, I can't take it seriously. Mainly because I'm me, I mean, I live with me. I know exactly what I'm like, and I'm not all that impressive. Anyway, so where we were was that Renee, with her father, Long Joseph, had just gone to the hospital after Renee had met up with Dr. Van Bleek, her old teacher, and given Dr. Van Bleek a copy of this gold gem that she had received in Mr. J's, this virtual nightclub, which seems to be connected to what's happened to the children. And then that's basically we don't need to know the rest of that. So that was what was going on. And so we're continuing with Renee's storyline here. It was dark. Even the stars barely shone, faint as mica chips in black sand. The only light in all the universe, it seemed, was the small fire burning within the circle of stones. She heard voices and knew that she was listening to her own children, and yet in some way they were also a tribe of strangers, a band that traveled through unimaginable lands. Kabu was one of them, and although she could not see him, she knew he was sitting beside her, one of the thin murmur of invisible souls. A greater darkness lay on the distant horizon, the space it occupied the only part of the sky that contained no stars. It was a vast, triangular shape, like a pyramid, but it stretched up impossibly high, as though they sat close to its base. As she stared at the great shadow, the voices around her murmured and sang. She knew they were all aware of that tall, dark mass. They feared it, but they also feared to leave it behind, this the only familiar thing in all the night. "What is it?" she whispered. A voice that she thought was Kabu's answered her. "It is the place where the burned one lives. On this night he comes. We have to run away." She suddenly knew that something was moving out beyond the firelight, something that lived in darkness, the way fish lived in water. They were being stalked by something vast and tenebrous, and in all the twilight universe, the only uncorrupted light came from the flames of this small fire. "But he will take only a few," the voice said. "The others will be safe. Only a few." "No, we can't let him have any of them." She reached out, but the arm she clutched turned insubstantial as smoke. The murmuring grew louder. Something was coming nearer, something huge that rattled the trees and stones, that hoarsely breathed. She tried to pull her friend back, but he seemed to come apart in her hands. Don't go! Old night itself was coming down on them, the jaws of darkness stretching wide. Rini sat up, panting. The murmuring still filled her ears, louder now, voices gasping and growling. Something was thumping in the darkness nearby. She did not know where she was. "Quiet yourself in there!" someone shouted, and she remembered that they were in the shelter. But the sounds were not distant. Bodies were struggling on the floor only a meter away from her. "Papa!" She fumbled for the torch, turned it on. By its light, she could see limbs moving erratically, thrashing and rolling, banging up against the fiberboard partitions. She could see the pale striped length of her father's pajamas, and nearby another torch lying on its side, spilling light like a tipped goblet. She rolled off the bed and grabbed Long Joseph's attacker around the neck, shouting, "Help! Someone help us!" There were more noises of complaint from other compartments, but some of the occupants seemed to be rousing themselves. She kept her grip on the stranger and curled her finger in his hair, then pulled back hard. He let out a high-pitched shriek of pain and clawed at her hand. Her father used the moment's respite to scramble free. The stranger had wriggled loose from Rini, but instead of fleeing, he crawled into a corner of the compartment and huddled there, with his hands wrapped around his head to ward off further attacks. Rini kept the flashlight on him, then saw her father coming back with a long, dull carving knife in his hand. "Papa, don't! I killed the bastard." He was breathing painfully hard. She could smell the rank alcohol sweat coming off him. "Follow my daughter around." "We don't know. He could have got the wrong room. Just wait, damn you." She crawled a little way toward the cowering stranger. "Who are you?" "He knew what he's doing. I hear him whisper your name." Rini had a moment of horror. Could it be Kabu looking for her? But even in partial darkness, the stranger seemed far too large. She reached out carefully and touched his shoulder. "Who are you?" she repeated. The man looked up, blinking in the torchlight. He had a cut across his hairline, which was sheeting blood down his forehead. It took her a long moment to recognize him. "Jeremiah," she said, "from Dr. Van Bleek's house?" He stared for a moment, clearly unable to see her behind the torch. "Irene Sulaweo." "Yes, it's me. For God's sake, what's happening here?" She stood. Already several people from the neighboring compartments were gathering outside the curtain, some with defensive weapons in hand. She went out and thanked them, telling them it had been a case of mistaken identity. They gradually dispersed, all relieved, some muttering imprecations about her drunkard father. She went back inside to find Jeremiah Dacot sitting against the wall, watching her father with some distrust. Rini found the small electric lantern and turned it on, then gave Dacot some paper toweling to wipe his bloodied face. Her father, who was still staring at the intruder as though he might sprout fur and fangs at any moment, allowed himself to be conducted to a folding chair. "I know this man, Papa. He works for Dr. Van Bleek." "What's he doing this hour, coming round here? Your boyfriend?" Dacot snorted with indignation. "No, he's not my boyfriend." She turned. "What are you doing here?" She looked at her watch. 1 in the morning. "The doctor sent me. I couldn't find your number to call you." She shook her head, puzzled. "She has my number. I know she does." Jeremiah stared at the blood-soaked paper in his hand for a moment, then looked up at Rini, eyes blinking rapidly. "Everybody's crying today," she thought. "What's going on?" "Dr. Susan is in the hospital," he said abruptly, furious and miserable. "She's very bad. Very bad." "Oh, my God." Rini reflexively tore off several more sheets of paper towel and gave them to him. "What happened?" Some men beat her up. They broke into the house. Dacot just held the towel. A rill of blood descended to his eyebrow. She asked to see you. He closed his eyes. I think she might die. Smugly ensconced in his role as defender of the household, Long Joseph at first insisted on accompanying them. Only after Rini pointed out that they might have to spend several hours in the hospital waiting room did he decide to remain at the shelter as a bulwark against other less forgivable prowlers. Jeremiah drove swiftly through the nearly empty streets. I don't know how the bastards got in. I went to see my mother. It's the night I always go. She's very old now, and she likes me to come and do things for her. The piece of toweling gleamed on his dark forehead, Rorschached by drying blood. I don't know how the bastards got in, he repeated. It was obviously something he considered a personal failure, despite his absence. In such circumstances, Rini knew the housekeeper or other employees were usually the first suspects, but it was hard to doubt Dacot's misery. Was it a robbery? They didn't take much, some jewelry, but they found Dr. Susan in her lab downstairs, so they must have known about the elevator. I think they tried to make her tell where she kept the money. They broke everything. Everything. He sobbed, then clenched his lips tightly, and for a few moments drove in silence. They destroyed things in her lab? He scowled. They smashed things. They're like animals. We keep no money in the house. If they wanted to steal, why did they not steal the machines? They are worth more than the few rands we keep around to tip for delivery boys. And how did you know the doctor wanted to see me? She told me while we were waiting for the ambulance. She could not talk much. Another sob shook him. She was just an old woman. Who could do such a thing? Rini shook her head. Terrible people. She could not cry. The streetlight sliding past had lulled her into a sort of dream state, as though she were a ghost haunting her own body. What was going on? Why did dreadful things keep happening to those around her? Terrible, terrible people, she said. Asleep, Susan Van Bleek looked like an alien creature. She was festooned with sensors and tubes, and only the mummifying bandages seemed to be holding her discolored and broken body in something like human form. Her breath wheezed in and out of her parted lips. Jeremiah burst into tears once more and slumped to the floor beside her bed, hands clasped at the back of his neck as if to keep his head from flying off with the force of his grief. As horrifying as it was to see her friend and teacher this way, Rini was still in a state of cold removal. This was the second time today she had been in a hospital, standing over the body of a silent loved one. At least the Westville University Medical Center did not have a Bukavu quarantine. A young black doctor wearing a stained smock and glasses with a taped nosepiece looked in. She needs rest, he said, frowning. Concussion, lots of bones broken. He gestured loosely down the ward full of sleeping patients. And it's not visiting time. She asked to see me, Rini explained. She said it was important. He frowned again, already distracted by some other thought, and wandered out. Rini borrowed a chair from beside one of the other beds. The patient in the bed, a cadaverously thin young man, blinked awake to watch her with a caged beast's eyes, but did not speak or move. She returned to the bed and adjusted herself in a comfortable position to keep vigil, taking the less bandaged of Susan's hands in hers. She had sagged into a half-sleep when she felt a pressure on her fingers. She sat up. Dr. Van Bleek's eyes were open and moving from side to side as though she were surrounded by fast-moving shapes. It's me, Rini, she gently squeezed. Irene, Jeremiah's here too. Susan stared at her for a moment, then relaxed. Her mouth was open, but nothing came out past the tube except a dry sound like an empty paper sack being blown along a street. Rini stood to go in search of water, but Dacot, kneeling beside her, pointed to the nothing by mouth sign hung on the bedstand. They put wire in her jaw. You don't need to talk anyway, Rini told her. We'll just stay here with you. Oh, little grandmother. Jeremiah pressed his forehead to the tube-girded arm. I should have been there. How could I let this happen? Susan pulled her hand free from Rini's grip and lifted it slowly until she could touch Dacot's face. Tears from his cheeks ran into her bandages. Then she gradually and deliberately put her hand back into Rini's once more. Can you answer questions? A squeeze. 2 squeezes for no, then? Another squeeze. Jeremiah said you wanted to see me? Yes. About the thing we talked about? The city? Yes. Rini suddenly wondered if she could be misinterpreting, since she hadn't received anything but single squeezes. Susan's face was so swollen it was hard even to be sure of her expression. Only her eyes moved. Do you want me to go home now and let you sleep? 2 squeezes, quite firm. No. Okay, let me think. Did you find the place in the picture? No. But you found out something about it? The squeeze was gentle and prolonged. Maybe? Yes. Rini hesitated. Did the men who hurt you, did they have something to do with this? What we talked about? Another long, slow pressure. Maybe. I'm trying to think of yes or no questions. This is really difficult. Do you think you could write or type? A long pause, then 2 squeezes. Then, is there someone I should talk to? Someone who gave you information and who could give me the same information? No. Then, a moment later, an additional pressure. Yes. Rini briskly named all of Susan's colleagues she could remember, but received a negative response to all of them. She worked her way through various police and network agencies, but had no better luck. As she despairingly considered the amount of time an elimination process carried out entirely in manual binary might take, Susan pushed her hand farther into Rini's and turned it so all her fingers were against Rini's palm. They moved fitfully, like the legs of a dying moth. Rini gripped the old woman's hand, trying to give comfort. Susan hissed at her. What? The doctor laboriously moved her fingers in Rini's palm again. Where the full hand squeezes had been easy to interpret, these movements were so light and so cramped as to seem nothing more than wriggling. Rini was defeated. This is terrible. There must be some better way. Typing, writing notes. She can't type, Jeremiah said mournfully, even when she could still talk. I tried before. I gave her pad to her when she said call you, but she couldn't push the squeezer keys hard enough. Susan weakly bumped her hand against Rini's palm again, glaring from the purple and red mask. Rini stared. That's it. That's what she's doing. Typing. Susan opened her hand again and squeezed Rini's fingers. But only the right hand. 2 squeezes. No. Susan bumped the heel of her hand against Rini's palm, then laboriously lifted her arm and moved it across her body. Rini gently caught it and brought it back. I get it. You push like that when it means you're switching typing hands. That's what you mean, isn't it? Yes. It was still a laborious process. Susan had great difficulty making Renee understand what squeezer keys the fingers of her right hand would be touching if they belonged to her left. It took almost an hour, with frequent steps for yes and no editing and correction, before she had finished her message. Susan had grown weaker throughout, and during the last 15 minutes had barely been able to move her fingers. Renee stared at the letters she had jotted in the margin of the hospital diet sheet. BLUDGANCHRITBCRFL. But it doesn't make sense. Some of it must be abbreviated. A final weary squeeze. Renee stood and leaned over the bed to brush her lips against Susan's broken-veined cheek. I'll figure it out somehow. No, we've kept you awake far too long. You need some sleep. Jeremiah stood too. I'll give you a ride back. He leaned over the doctor. Then I'll be right back, little grandmother. Don't you be scared. Susan made a whistling noise that was almost a moan. He paused. She stared at him, clearly frustrated by her inability to speak, then at Renee. Her eyes blinked slowly, once, twice. Yes, you're tired. You sleep now. Dacot also leaned and kissed her. Renee wondered if that was the first time he had ever done so. On the way out to the car, she had a sudden feeling that she knew what those blinks had been meant to say. Goodbye. By the time Dacot dropped her off, it was past 4 a.m. She was too full of furious, frustrated anger to sleep, so she spent the hours before dawn staring at her pad, trying every way she could to find some shape behind the sequence of letters Dr. Van Bleek had given her. The databanks of the net dumped back hundreds of names from all over the world. A dozen came from Brazil alone, and almost as many from Thailand, that actually contained most of the letters in sequence, but none of them seemed particularly likely. But if she couldn't turn up any better information, she knew she would have to contact every one of them. She watched as a code-breaking algorithm she had downloaded from the Polytechnic Library assembled thousands of combinations that fit smaller segments of the letters, a dizzying assortment that made her eyes ache and her head buzz. Renee smoked and watched the screen, punching in additional queries as they occurred to her. The day's first light began to leak in through the cracks in the roof. Her father snored happily in his bed, still wearing his slippers. Somewhere else in the shelter, some other early riser was playing a radio, bringing in news in an Asian language she didn't recognize. Renee was just about to call Kabu, who she knew got up with the dawn, and tell him the news about Susan, when she suddenly saw the obvious thing she had missed. The last 5 letters of the doctor's laborious message. BCRFL. Be careful. Her irritation at her own weary blindness was quickly pushed aside by a clench of fear. The doctor in the hospital with critical injuries, quite possibly given to her by the very people Renee had offended, had taken a great deal of effort to tell her old student something that should have gone without saying. Susan Van Bleek was not someone who wasted effort at the best of times, let alone when struggling for every movement. Renee set the code algorithm back to work minus the last 5 letters, then phoned Kabu. After some time, his landlady answered, keeping the visual blacked out, and said crossly that he was not in his room. He said he sleeps outside sometime, Renee said. Could he be out there? That little man isn't anywhere, I told you. Not inside, not outside. Tell the truth, I don't think he came back last night at all. The line went dead. Her fears rapidly multiplying, she checked her mail to see if Kabu had left her a message. He had not, but to her astonishment, there was a voicemail from Dr. Van Bleek. Hello, Irene. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get back to you. Susan's voice sounded strong and cheerful, and for a moment Rennie was completely baffled. I'll try to get a hold of you later tonight directly, but I'm in the middle of something right now and don't have time to talk much, so I thought I'd just dump this quickly. It had been recorded before the attack. It was a message from another world, another life. I haven't found anything definite yet, but I've got a few connections that may prove fruitful. Let me tell you, dear, this whole thing is very strange indeed. I can't find anything like an actual match with your picture anywhere. I've had every single urban area on the globe under scrutiny. I know things about Reykjavik that even the Reykjavictims, or whatever they call themselves, don't know. And although I know you didn't agree, I've been running searches on image banks as well, just in case it was something cobbled up for a SimWorld or a Netflix. No luck there either. But I have had some success with statistical similarity searches. Nothing definite, just some intriguing clusters of hits. Martine should be calling back soon, and she may have some ideas too. In any case, I won't say more until some of the calls I've put out get answered. I'm too old to enjoy looking foolish, but I'll just say I'm going to be renewing some previous acquaintances. Very previous. Anyway, dear, that's it. Just wanted to let you know I was working on it. I haven't forgotten. And I hope you haven't become so wrapped up in this yourself that you're skipping meals or sleep. You used to have a very bad habit of trying to make up for initial laziness with last-moment diligence. Not a good plan, Irene. Take care. I'll talk to you in person later. The line clicked. Rennie stared at her pad, wishing that she could make it say more, feeling that if she could just push the right button, her teacher would come back on and tell her all the things she'd been holding back. Susan had talked to her in person later, which made the whole thing an even crueler joke. Previous acquaintances. What could that mean? She had already tried the names of all the doctor's colleagues she could remember. Rennie sent the computer searching through various educational guild records, trying to match the letters of Susan's message with the names of anyone at any of the institutions that had employed her. Her eyes were blurry from staring at the pad screen, but there was nothing else to do until it was time to go to work. There wasn't a chance in hell she would be able to catch any sleep in her current frame of mind. Besides, work made it easier not to worry about Kabu. She was on her 7th or 8th cigarette since dawn and watching a coffee tab dissolve in her cup when someone tapped lightly on the front of the partition, near the curtain that served as the front wall. Startled, she held her breath for a moment. She looked around for something to use as a weapon, but the torch had disappeared somewhere. She decided that the cup of boiling water in her hand would have to suffice. As she moved quietly toward the curtain, her father coughed in his sleep and rolled over. She jerked back the heavy cloth. Kabu looked up at her, slightly startled. "Did I wake you?" he began, but did not finish his sentence. Rennie stepped forward and hugged him, so incautiously that she spilled coffee on her own hand. She swore and dropped the cup, which shattered on the concrete. "Damn! Ow! Sorry!" She waved her singed hand. Kabu stepped forward. "Are you well?" "Just burned myself." She sucked her fingers. "No, I mean..." He stepped inside, pulling the curtain closed. I had a fearful dream. I feared for you, so I came here." She stared. He did look quite out of sorts, his clothes rumpled and clearly donned in haste. But why didn't you call?" He looked down at his feet. I
I am ashamed to say that I did not think of it. I awakened and was afraid. I set out to come here. He squatted beside the wall, a simple, lithe movement. There was something about the way he did it that reminded Rini he was not entirely of her world, something that remained archaic despite his modern clothes. I could not find a bus, so I walked. From Chesterville? Oh, Cabo, you must be exhausted. I'm fine, healthy anyway, but bad things have happened. She quickly told him about Dr. Van Bleek, describing what she knew of the attack and its aftermath. Instead of growing wide with surprise at the news, Kabu's heavy-lidded eyes narrowed as though he were being forced to look at something painful. This is very sad. He shook his head. I dreamed that she shot an arrow at you and it pierced your heart. It was a very strong dream, very strong. He clapped his hands softly together, then pressed them tight. I I feared it meant that you had been injured in some way by something the two of you had done. She she shot something to me, but I hope it will save people, not kill them. She curled her lip. Or at least I hope it will help us find out if I'm going mad or not. When she had finished explaining the doctor's messages and her night's work, speaking swiftly but quietly so as not to bring her father into things any earlier than she had to, the little man remained squatting on the floor, his head down. There are crocodiles in this river, he said at last. In her weariness, it took her a moment to make sense of what he said. We have pretended as long as we could that they were only rocks pushing up above the surface, or floating logs, but we can ignore them no longer. Rini sighed. She had sparked a bit in relief at seeing Cabo safe. Now she suddenly felt she could sleep for a month given the chance. Too many things have happened, she agreed. Stephen, lost. Stephen's friend with some kind of brain damage. What happened to us in the club? Now our flat block's been burned and Susan's been attacked and beaten. We'd be idiots not to believe something's very wrong here. But she felt her anger turn sour and miserable. We can't prove anything. Nothing. We'd have to bribe the police just to get them not to laugh out loud when we told them. Unless we find that city, and finding it teaches us something. Or unless we go back in again. His face was curiously blank. To that place. I don't think I could ever go back in there, she said. She blinked, sleepiness pulling at her very hard. No, I could, for Stephen, but I don't know what good it would do us. They'll just be waiting for us this time, unless we could find some better, more secret way to hack in. She stopped, thinking. Do you have an idea? Asked Cabo. Surely a place like that would have very good, what is the word, security. Yes, of course. No, that's not what I was thinking. I was just remembering something Susan told me once. I had been involved in some stupid thing, messing with the college record systems just for fun, something like that. Anyway, she was completely scorched, not because I'd done it, she said, but because I was risking my chance to make something of myself. Rini ran her fingers across her pad screen, calling up options. She told me the thing itself was no big deal. All the students did it. She'd done it, she said, and lots worse. She'd been quite a daredevil in the early days of the net. Long Joseph Sulaweo grunted and sat up in bed, stared at Rini and Cabo for a moment with no sign of recognition, then fell back into his thin mattress, snoring again within seconds. So you are thinking? She said previous acquaintances, very previous. What do you want to bet she's been talking to some of her ancient hacker buddies. What do you want to bet? She stared at the screen. Now all I have to do is think of some kind of search criteria for retired online troublemakers. Match it up to whatever we've got in the way of letters and just see if we don't come up with Dr. Susan's mystery sauce. It took 15 minutes, but the hit, when it came, seemed conclusive. Murat Sega Singh. And look at this guy's background. University of Natal, same time as Susan. Then extended work with Telemorphics SA and a bunch of smaller companies over the next 20 years or so. And there's a 6-year gap, just a few years after he got out of school. What you want to bet he was working for the government or military intelligence? But this Sega thing, those letters do not match. She grinned. Ah, but look at this. He had a handle. That's a code name that hackers use so they could sign their work without using their real names, which tends to get you prosecuted. She tilted her pad so Kabu could see it better. Blue Dog Anchorite. The world must be full of things, but she knew there wouldn't be many of those. Kabu nodded. It seems that you have solved the puzzle. Where is this person? Does he still live in this country? Well, that's a problem. Winnie frowned. The addresses kind of dry up about 20 years ago. Maybe he got into some sort of trouble and had to disappear. Of course, a gifted hacker can disappear in plain sight. She ran a few more criteria and sat back to wait for an answer. Girl? Long Joseph was sitting up again, this time eyeing Kabu with obvious suspicion. What the hell's going on here? Nothing, Papa. I'll get you some coffee. As she poured water into a cup, guiltily remembering the shards of her own mug, which were still scattered in front of their compartment where someone might step on them, Kabu stood over her pad. Rini, he said, eyeing a row of listings. There is a word coming up here several times. Perhaps it is a place or a person? I have not heard of it. What? Something called Treehouse. Before she could reply, the pad's phone light began to blink. Rini set down the cup and the package of coffee tablets and hurried to answer it. It was Jeremiah Daco, and he was crying. Before he had even said an intelligible word, Rini already knew what had happened. And even though it's still a couple minutes, we're going to stop because that's the end of the chapter. And next is chapter 18, which I think is a return to some of the Paul Jonas story. So anyway, we got a couple of minutes left. Yes, the looking glass. That's actually very appropriate now that we're in the looking glass version of my office. That tomorrow in the evening broadcast, we're going to be reading the looking glass version of Otherland. Anyway, so with that, as we come slowly up to the top of the hour, I want to thank you as always for joining me. I will have more information for you about the Deathless Prince and Peach Maiden, which I only just sort of found out. I mean, it's been kind of hanging fire for a long, long time. I didn't know what was going to happen with it. It's not really long enough to be a novel all by itself. It's a very long short story. And it's got some interesting expansion of some of the Otherland ideas. It contains some of the information, along with Happiest Dead Boy in the World, that are kind of some of the underpinnings or foundations that I might use if I get around to writing another Otherland, or at least another Otherland novel about Orlando, because there's a lot of stuff there that interests me in terms of what Orlando actually is and what he actually can do. But I'll talk to you about that when I know more about it and when I know, what the publication
schedule and plan is and stuff like that. Until that point, and until I read again 7 p.m. This evening, I will thank you all so much for joining me. It's always a huge pleasure to share time with you. I hope you will all continue well, that you'll take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, your family and friends, and anybody else out there who needs it. It's a very good time to contribute to anything, in the way of charities or whatever that you can help out, because there's a lot of people who are in need of help at the moment. The economies have been strange in lots of countries because of the pandemic. And so don't hesitate, if you have a little extra time or a little extra money, to throw it at somebody who is in need. And yeah, that's it basically. So thanks again. Good to see you. Peace. And I will see you at 7 p.m. And then again, if you can't make the 7 p.m., I will see you next week at 1 a.m. my time when I return. So again, thank you and good night.